Hi, and welcome to the first episode of It's Not Obvious Java Edition for Mac OS X, and I'm Hansel. Today I will be introducing you to BlueJ. In this episode, I will cover downloading, installing, and starting BlueJ, where to find files, what the files are, what Java files are, as well as a brief introduction to Java programming, a very simple Hello World program. I will also be going over what IDEs are, Integrated Development Environment in general, and I will explain at that point why I'm using BlueJ for my examples, as well as other commonly used IDEs for Java. This video is primarily for my CSS 142 students at the University of Washington. That being said, if you are new to programming, or if you are new to Java programming and you're not sure where to get started, how to get set up so that you can write Java program and run it, this is a great video to get you started. Who am I? Again, I'm Hansel, and if it matters, I'm currently a part-time faculty at the University of Washington, and during the day, I'm also a software manager at Amazon, specifically at AWS Kumo. If you want to know more about what I've done, feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. Before we begin, I want to go over an acronym that I teach my students, which is PET. PET stands for Problem Solving Engineering Tools and Terminology. And that really has to do with everything that you need to know, all the blend of skills that you need to know in order to properly write a program. A lot of times people think when they're new to programming that programming is just writing a whole bunch of code and then stuff magically happens. It doesn't really work that way. A lot of programming is a lot of problem solving, a lot of engineering, and in order to do that, you need to be familiar with the tools as well as the terminology in order to properly write a program and work with others with it. So this episode, because it has to do with BlueJ. BlueJ is a tool, and I will also be going over some terminology that you will need to know in order to begin your programming journey. To begin with, we will begin by downloading BlueJ by going to bluej.org and downloading the appropriate file for us. When you go to bluej.org, you will see something like this, and you will see an option of operating systems. For me, I am on Mac OS X, so I click on this, and it shows me an option to open or save the file. Now, for me, I have already saved the file in order to save time, and you get this BlueJ Mac 502.zip. Whenever you download it, you might get a slightly different number than this. You might get 503, 504, or something else. It typically isn't going to matter too much. It's going to be pretty similar with what I will be showing you today. If you're on a Mac, you can double click on this, and it will extract the file, and you get this folder, BlueJ 5.0.2. And in the folder, once you open it, you will see something like this, bluej.app. At this point, you could simply double click on this and open BlueJ, or you can move it to the applications folder. You go to the applications folder and you can execute it from there. All right, so while we're waiting for BlueJ to open, let me go over what IDE is really briefly. An IDE is an integrated development environment that allows you to do a whole lot of things that tells the computer how to bring a program together, how to translate essentially the words that you're typing on the screen into something the computer can execute. Now, in order to do that, we will begin by first creating a new project in BlueJ. And when you create your first project, you are going to have to keep track of where the project is located. The name of the project can be almost anything you want. Of course, after that, we're going to have to do a bunch more stuff, but let's not get too far ahead. Let's begin by creating our first project. When you open BlueJ, you will see something like this. This is the project view. Right now, there's nothing in it just yet, and we need to go to project and click on new project. If you do that, you get this window, and you will get some location that tells you where the project files are going to be located. In this, you are going to have probably a slightly different default location to store your project. For me, my default location is on the desktop. So first, let me show you what's on my desktop. Nothing. Cool. Now, we get to create a new project, and I'm just going to call this Hello World Project. You can see here that this can be anything that you want. You can have spaces in the project name, and we can say OK, and immediately on the desktop, it creates a new folder. And in the folder, you get this package.bluej and this readme.txt. This readme.txt actually isn't really anything. If you open it, it just says this is the project readme file. Here you should describe your project, tell the reader, someone who does not know anything about this project, all they need to know. The comments should include at least the title, purpose, date, or version, how to start the project, authors, user instructions. This is completely optional. It's up to you if you want to fill this out or not. It's not going to change anything that you do in terms of writing software. Now, you'll notice here that in BlueJ, once we create that project, it says BlueJ Hello World project. Let's go to the next portion of this. We need to now create a new class. Note that whereas the project name can have spaces, a new class, the class name cannot have any spaces in the name. Now, what exactly is a class? I will go over that in a future episode. Right now, we will be assuming that you have to create a new class, and I will demonstrate to you how to do that. And I will also show you how to open what's called a Java file in a text editor and what that means. All right. So let's come back to BlueJ. There's several different ways to create a new class. One, you can simply click on New Class, and it opens this window for you, and you can enter in the class name and say OK. There's also, you can go to Edit, New Class, which opens exactly the same window. Either way, it does exactly the same thing. So you can enter in the class name here. Now, you can do Hello World, and you'll notice immediately that if I have a space between hello and world, it says not a valid Java class name. So in order to fix that, you simply get rid of the space, and it creates a class for you. BlueJ gives you this visual representation of a class that says, hey, you have a class called Hello World. Now, what is inside of Hello World? If we were to go back to the folder that we had earlier, you'll notice here that all of a sudden, automagically, this hello world.java file is created. Now, if we were to open by double-clicking Hello World, you see something like this. It's a little bit weird if you think about it, because if you notice up here, it says BlueJ Class Edit Tools Options. And if you're in this window of BlueJ, you have Project Edit Tools View and Help. So you'll notice that there are different options associated to the different windows that BlueJ opens for you. I'll go over what this means a little bit later, but keep in mind that depending on what window you have open in BlueJ, it has different options for you to work with. All right, so Hello World was this class project that we created just now. But somehow, there's a whole lot of stuff in here already. At this point in time, all of these things don't really matter. BlueJ automatically creates all of these default things for you as an example, which is why here it says, hey, write a description of class Hello World, author your name, version, a number, or a date. This is also what's known as a comment block. Next episode, I will be going over what comment blocks are, but for now, I'm just going to get rid of this. Boop, all gone. All right, so then we have public class Hello World and this open squiggly bracket, and also this close squiggly bracket, and a few different things. We have an instance variable, we have a constructor, we have a sample method. Again, for now, we don't need any of this just yet. In a future episode, I will explain what all of these means. For now, for our purposes, you don't need it just yet. Instead, what you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to type in public static void main, open close, open parentheses, and you're going to type in string with a capital S, open and close square brackets, arcs, and open and close squiggly brackets. All right, now you'll notice also that Hello World is in, public class Hello World is in this green box, whereas public static void main is in this yellow box. That's something that BlueJ automatically does for you, and that's one of the benefits of using an IDE, that it provides visual cues for you to work with. For example, you also have class and void in red over here, and you have a lot of other things in black. Now, as we go on, we're going to see more formatting and more highlighting as BlueJ helps us basically write a code. Right, now, to show you what the connection is between Hello World that we created in BlueJ and this Hello World.java, we can open Hello World.java with text edit. If we were to open it with text edit, you see that in here it has exactly what you write in here. You can also add anything you want in either place, and it's going to be reflected in the other, with some caveats. Now, if we were to do public class Hello World, public static void main, string array arguments, We can also add another comment in here that says an initial comment before we begin programming. Okay, great. And the moment we do file, save, not long after, what we wrote over here shows up also in BlueJ. There is a slight difference, there is a slight catch in that if we were to go to BlueJ and we go more comments to demonstrate what's going on, and then we save it, class save, hello world.java does not automatically update itself. And the reason for that is because TextEdit does not automatically refresh the contents of the file that it opens, but BlueJ does. On the other hand, if we were to go to hello world.java and we do open with and open TextEdit again, you'll see that it is exactly the same as what we have updated in BlueJ. Okay, cool. So that's a really brief introduction in terms of creating a new class and opening the Java file in a regular text editor and some basic segments of the class. Now, there are some things that we call statements and code blocks. In terms of statements, we are about to write our first statement. Technically, you have already seen a little bit of statement because this block of code is also a kind of statement when it comes to programming. Let's not think about that too much. In terms of a code block, think of it in terms of the colors that BlueJ have already very neatly provided for you. This green block is its own thing, and this yellow block is its own thing, but you can see that the yellow block is inside the green block. All right, we can actually create a lot more functions, a lot more blocks of code than what we currently see, and we'll demonstrate that as we go along, not this episode, but in future episodes. So I will also be showing you how to compile several different ways to do that. Before we do that though, I do want to show you how to print to the screen or to the console, and I will also explain just really briefly why we type specifically public static void main string array args. This open and close square bracket is also known as an array, and we'll go over arrays in a future episode again. All right, so in order to print to the console, we need to use a statement that basically says system out print ln, in other words print line, and we'll just do a quick hello world. Okay, now that you have something like this, you can compile it several different ways. In order to run the program, the computer, in this case BlueJ, needs to first compile the code, because when it comes to programming, there's actually a lot of stuff that's going on in the background that it has to pull together in order to build something that the computer can execute. And that's what compiling means. So think about compiling a whole bunch of information into one place, or compiling a whole bunch of pictures. Exactly the same concept. When we hit compile, the computer, in this case BlueJ, pulls a whole bunch of things together in order to make things happen for us. So one way is to click this button that says compile. Another is to right click on hello world in the project view and click on compile. Yet another, we can go to, oh, where is it? Oh, okay. I guess in this case, we only have compile button. We can also say tools, compile, compile selected, or rebuild package will also compile everything. All right, so let's click on compile, and you'll see where previously there were the diagonal lines. It is now gone, it's clear, and this tells us that this has been compiled. Now, any change you make with the file, even just adding a new line without adding any statements at all, it puts the code into a state where it goes, hey, I don't know what you did, you need to compile again. So we can compile, and now it's in a good state again. We can go in order to run the code that we've written. In this case, we just have the system out print line hello world. You need to go to this view, you need to go to this window, and you need to right click and click on void main string array args. Okay, and we just say okay. And that brings us this, whoops. That brings us this window right here. Okay, and it's nothing particularly exciting. It just says hello world, and that's it. We can do multiple things. We can do another print line, system out print line, hello CSS 142 at u.bothell. And we can compile. We need to run this again. Click OK. And then we need to open that thing, and it says hello world, hello CSS 142 at u.bothell. Now there's a couple of different things that you're gonna have to do. One, if you are looking at this project window and you're following along, it's probably looking a little bit different than what you see here. And that's probably because under options, you do not have this checkbox, this check mark under next to clear screen at method call. So let me show you what happens if you don't have that. So here, I just clicked that, I unchecked it, so now there's no checkbox or check mark anymore. If I were to run this again, it doesn't erase anything. It simply adds more hello world, hello CSS 142 at u.bothell. As many times as you run it, it simply adds it onto the screen. Now, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to go to options. With this particular window selected, you want to go to options and click on clear screen at method call, so you have the check mark right there when you are executing the code. So now that we have that check mark there, when we run the code by clicking on void main string array args, say OK, it clears everything up before it runs the code. So that way you know, that way you see exactly only the code that you are executing. Okay, great. Where are we? So I've shown you several different ways of compiling. I've shown you how to print to the screen or console, and I've shown you how to run or execute the program and this clear screen at method call aspect of things. So why do we write public static void main string array args? This is also known as the main method. The main method for a Java program is almost like a beginning paragraph when you're writing an essay. So think of it that way. It's a beginning paragraph when you're writing an essay. It's the beginning of the program. Now, in the future, I will show you different ways to do things so that you don't always have to do public static void main in order to begin your program. But for now, please follow this convention. Type in public static void main string array args in order to have a beginning of your program that you can execute. That changes very quickly once you get into slightly more complex programming. But for now, just put everything in main. Use public static void main string array args. All right, great. So that's basically it in terms of introducing you to the basics of Java and BlueJ. In terms of IDEs in general, IDE is called an integrated development environment, and you can go to Wikipedia to understand better what an integrated development environment is. Essentially, it is a source code editor, which is a text editor plus a whole bunch of extras. It has coloring, it has markings, it has different abilities for you to see and work with your code. Now, it's also a way for you to manage your file very quickly, because otherwise you have to manage all the files yourself. And it gives you build or compile capabilities. It can also show you some syntax or compile errors. So let's come back to this. Earlier I mentioned that we're going to be working with statements. In Java, every single statement ends with a semicolon. Java actually doesn't really care. In general, programming languages don't really care about comments. We can get rid of all the comments, doesn't make a difference. But when it comes to the semicolon, if you forget to use that, it will give you an error message that says semicolon expected. And if you try to compile, it will give you the error message semicolon expected. And you'll see here also that in the project window, it shows you this red basically cross stitches that says, hey, this particular class is in a bad state. You cannot compile it. You need to fix it. All right. So there are things like that with IDEs that very quickly show you if you have a syntax or a compile error. It also has debugging capabilities, which I will demonstrate in the future, and it also has the ability to generate files that can be executed directly on the computer. Again, for a future episode, not today. BlueJ in itself doesn't have autocomplete or IntelliSense. other IDEs actually do have autocomplete and IntelliSense. So let's talk about BlueJ and other IDEs. So BlueJ is really a simple to use IDE that at UW Bothell we recommend for beginning students to use. And this is really just to give people a beginning tool that is not overly complex, that is the minimum that they need in order to get going and be effective in terms of learning the language and learning how to program. There are a bunch of other IDEs. There's IntelliJ, Visual Studio Code, Eclipse, and NetBeans, just to name a few that are popular. Feel free to explore all of these different IDEs. For the most part, they're free and you can get started with them. Of course, you're going to be following a slightly different set of instructions than I demonstrated here for BlueJ. In the future, I might create additional videos that goes over how you can get started with all of these different IDEs, but not right now. All right, so that's it for today. I'll see you next time. And some questions that I want to ask you before our next episode is, what were some things that were obvious to you? Did you learn anything new? And if you like this episode, please subscribe for more content. And especially if you're one of my students, and even if you're not, please tell me in the comments if there are other things in this episode that were not obvious to you that I should more clearly call out in future episodes. Thank you. Until next time.